Chapter 9, By the Light. The golden beam of light piercing the heavens reached its crescendo, the brilliance too powerful for mortal eyes. The battlefield stilled as an overwhelming presence descended, each moment growing heavier as the divine energy filled the air. Then, like a comet blazing through the sky, Archangel Michael arrived. His descent was swift and unrelenting, his armored form radiant with divine power. He landed atop the High Priestess, her fragile mortal body splattering across the chapel in an explosion of crimson and light. The ground shook with the force of his landing, cracks spidering across the marble floor of the chapel. A blinding shockwave of holy light burst outward, sweeping through the entire city. The shockwave rolled through every crevasse, alley, and tower, its golden brilliance vaporizing the undead where they stood. Skeletal warriors disintegrated mid-lunge, their bones reduced to ash. The grotesque horde dissolved, their unholy energy consumed by the overwhelming purity of the light. Within moments, the city was silent, its streets no longer teeming with the dead. The holy light cleansed everything in its path, save for two figures who stood unscathed. Liara and Aldric, the newly forged Death Knights, remained, their frost-tipped wings shimmering in the aftermath of the holy blast. Their unholy auras pulsed faintly, a testament to the power that shielded them from the light's wrath. Michael rose to his full height, his resplendent wings unfurling in a display of celestial might. His armor, crafted from heavenly gold, glowed with an otherworldly intensity. In one hand he held a radiant sword, its edge shimmering with divine fire. His piercing gaze fell upon Liara and Aldric, his expression a mixture of sorrow and righteous fury. "Look upon what you have become," Michael said, his voice echoing like 1,000 trumpets. "Once you were the defenders of the light, champions of faith and virtue, and now you stand as twisted shadows of your former selves, consumed by darkness, bound by chains of unholy power." Liara shifted uncomfortably, her frost-covered wings flexing. Aldric stood firm, his icy gaze locking onto the Archangel. Michael continued, his tone growing sharper. "This is the price of your hubris. You have forsaken the path of the light, and now you stand as abominations against the very essence you once swore to protect." Aldric raised his frost-covered blade, his voice cold and defiant. "We are no longer bound by your light, Archangel. Your reign over this city is over." Liara followed, her frost-tipped wings flaring. "We are stronger than you could ever comprehend. Your words mean nothing." Michael's gaze hardened, his radiant sword igniting with celestial fire. "So be it. Let the light judge you." With a single beat of his wings, Michael surged forward, his blade crashing against Aldric's with a deafening roar. Sparks of golden fire and icy frost erupted from their clash, the energy rippling outward in a blinding wave. Liara darted in, her frost-tipped wings slicing through the air as she swung her blade at Michael's exposed side. But the Archangel twisted with inhuman speed, his flaming sword meeting hers in a dazzling burst of light. The battlefield became a tempest of holy and unholy energy. Michael moved with divine precision, each swing of his blade a masterful strike that radiated golden fire. Aldric's icy strikes countered with equal ferocity, his blade leaving trails of frost that froze the very air. Liara weaved between the two, her movements a blend of grace and unholy fury. Her frost-covered wings beat powerfully, sending shards of ice toward Michael, but the Archangel's radiant aura melted them before they could connect. "You are strong," Michael admitted, his voice steady as his blade clashed against Aldric's. "But strength without purpose is hollow. You will fall." The battle raged with unrelenting ferocity, the clash of divine fire and unholy frost painting the battlefield in a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. Aldric's strikes grew more desperate, his frost-covered blade carving through the air with raw power. Liara moved with deadly grace, her frost-tipped wings leaving icy trails as she pressed Michael from above. But Michael, unyielding as the heavens themselves, countered each attack with celestial precision. His radiant sword became an extension of his will, blazing with divine fire as it deflected Aldric's icy swings and met Liara's frost-coated blade with devastating force. "Your darkness has no place here," Michael declared, his voice resonating across the city. "The light will cleanse this corruption." With a sudden surge of golden energy, Michael drove his flaming sword downward, meeting Aldric's blade in a clash that sent shockwaves rippling through the air. The Death Knight's strength faltered as Michael's overwhelming power forced him to his knees. Aldric's frost-covered wings drooped, their icy sheen dimming as his corrupted blade shattered under the might of Michael's strike. The once proud Death Knight let out a guttural growl, his unholy aura flickering and fading. Michael stepped forward, his gaze piercing. "You were a warrior of light, Aldric, and now you will be at peace." With a swift, merciful strike, Michael's blade pierced Aldric's chest. A burst of golden light erupted, consuming the Death Knight in a radiant explosion. When the light faded, only silence remained where Aldric had stood. Seeing her comrade fall, Liara let out a cry of rage, her frost-covered wings flaring as she launched herself at Michael. Her strikes were wild, fueled by unholy fury, but Michael's movements were deliberate and unyielding. "You are not beyond redemption," Michael said as he parried her attacks. "But if you will not yield, the light will show no mercy." Liara's blade clashed against Michael's, but the Archangel's divine strength overpowered her. With a final, devastating strike, Michael's sword shattered her weapon, sending shards of frost scattering across the battlefield. The Death Knight stumbled backward, her frost-tipped wings faltering as she collapsed to her knees. Michael stood over her, his radiant sword poised for the final blow. "Release her soul," he commanded, his voice softer now. Liara's frost-covered wings began to fade, the unholy corruption receding as a golden glow enveloped her. Her empty gaze softened, and for a brief moment, the Liara of old seemed to return. "Thank you," she whispered before the light consumed her, her form dissolving into golden embers that drifted upward toward the heavens. Michael lowered his sword, the battlefield now silent, save for the faint whispers of the wind. The city, cleansed by the light, stood in stark contrast to the devastation that had befallen it. As Michael surveyed the horizon, his piercing gaze caught movement. A lone figure emerged from the shadows, her silhouette framed by the faint light of dawn. It was Lilith. She walked with purpose, her crimson cloak billowing behind her. Her dark aura pulsed faintly, a stark contrast to the radiant light that still lingered in the city. Her gaze locked onto Michael, and a faint smile played on her lips. "Michael," she said, her voice carrying effortlessly across the distance. "At last we meet." Michael's grip tightened on his blade as he turned fully to face her. "The light has no place for you, Lilith." Lilith chuckled, her voice dripping with malice. "Oh, but I'm not here for the light. I'm here for the end." Michael standing resolute, his sword glowing with divine fire as Lilith's presence loomed over the horizon,